Continuation of Chapter 11. False liberation leads to violence. What the Pope said then remains very pertinent. The problems that he discusses are far from being resolved. All worker priests who are currently in the factories and work, they claim, in the midst of the workers, still speak the language of progressive priests who preach the liberation of the workers, their economic, social, and moral liberation, etc. They use the resounding phrases progress, liberty, and at the same time, of course, universal charity and mutual love. The same pathetic sentiments which, moreover, bore the few faithful who still go to church and hear the same thing every Sunday. To discuss social problems, they take examples from the press. They talk about murders. Why are there murders? Of course, they condemn the assassins, but they add, one cannot gauge the situation they were in and which pushed them to act. Ultimately, they come to defend all the murderers. They justify their actions by saying that they found such bad social circumstances because society is bad and badly ordered, because people are unjust, etc. Are we supposed to conclude that these people were forced to kill? It is society that is called into question. As for the murderers, they are not guilty. Even in Switzerland, a land once renowned for its tranquility, peace, and order, things have changed quite a bit. People used to say about Switzerland that it is the country where everyone is nice, they do not insult each other, they have peace. Presently, it is quite different. About 6 months ago, veritable insurrections took place in Zurich, Bern, Lausanne, and Geneva. The instigators of the disturbances even tried to come to Sion. At the beginning, 300 young people were demonstrating, but the last time they numbered 6,000 at Zurich. They demolished everything. And in Le Nouvelliste, the newspaper of the Valais, a well-known journalist wrote, quote, "We must not condemn them all. It is necessary to consider the profound motives that determine mob action, etc." End quote. And if the police are constrained to use arms, or if they put the rioters in prison, it is they who are held responsible for not having understood the profound motives that push the demonstrators to break everything. If Switzerland has come to this, then her days are numbered. Switzerland will be afflicted by the same difficulties and the same disequilibrium that afflict Italy, Spain, and other countries. The police will no longer be able to do anything, because they are always in the wrong as soon as they oppose a demonstration. It is true that if societies have reached such a point, it did not come about overnight. It is because they rejected the foundation of the moral and social education of peoples, and this was done according to the principles born of the Revolution, which have led to the destabilization of societies. Refutation of the Sillonist system. In the first part of his letter to the French bishops on the Sillon, Pope Pius X explained first of all the movement's doctrine, in particular the point concerning authority, and the way in which the Sillonists consider and judge authority. Then he touched on the question of how, according to their principles, they envisage social doctrine, and lastly, how they understand human dignity. In relation to this, the Pope refers especially to the idea of emancipation that, moreover, animates the progressives of our day, who have inherited all the modernist and Sillonist doctrines, according to which the adult must emancipate himself at the political, economic, and intellectual levels, all of which are encompassed in the Pope's condemnation of this way of understanding human dignity. Quote, "This brief explanation, venerable brethren, will show you clearly how much reason we have to say that the Sillon opposes doctrine to doctrine, that it seeks to build its city on a theory contrary to Catholic truth, and that it falsifies the basic and essential notions which regulate social relations in human society. The following considerations will make this opposition even more evident." End quote. After having set forth the doctrine of the Sillon, the Pope reviews the principles in order to judge them and condemn them one after the other. Firstly, authority, second, social doctrine, and thirdly, human dignity. Authority comes from God. Quote, "The Sillon places public authority primarily in the people, from whom it then flows into the government, in such a manner, however, that it continues to reside in the people." End quote. Here is where the error lies. Quote, "But Leo XIII absolutely condemned this doctrine in his encyclical Diuturnum Illud on political government, in which he said, quote, "Modern writers in great numbers, following in the footsteps of those who called themselves philosophers in the last century, declare that all power comes from the people. Consequently, those who exercise power in society do not exercise it from their own authority, but from an authority delegated to them by the people, and on the condition that it can be revoked by the will of the people from whom they hold it. Quite contrary is the sentiment of Catholics." End quote. So the Catholic doctrine is the contrary of that, quote, "who hold that the right of governing derives from God as its natural and necessary principle. Admittedly, the Sillon holds that authority, which it first places in the people, descends from God, but in such a way, quote, as to return from below upwards, whilst," now note how the Sillonists admit it, "in the organization of the Church, power descends from above downwards. But besides its being abnormal for the delegation of power to ascend, since it is in its nature to descend, Leo XIII refuted in advance this attempt to reconcile Catholic doctrine with the error of philosophism. For, he continues, quote, "It is necessary to remark here that those who preside over the government of public affairs may indeed, in certain cases, be chosen by the will and judgment of the multitude, without repugnance or opposition to Catholic doctrine. But, whilst this choice marks out the ruler, it does not confer upon him the authority to govern it. It does not delegate the power. It designates the person who will be invested with it." End quote. It is very important to emphasize this and make it understood. We have now become so used to seeing everything settled by elections. It is the people who command. The people keep the power and can take back authority from the officials by means of referendums. Ultimately, one comes to concede that authority truly resides in the people and remains there. And this is contrary to the doctrine of the Church. The Catholic says that While the people can designate who exercises authority, it does not confer authority. Authority comes from God. In the Church, clearly, the authorities in general are named by the superiors in the ecclesiastic hierarchy, except for the Pope, who is elected by a conclave. This is also an election, but in this case, it is not the conclave that gives the authority to the Pope. It comes from God. Once the person has been designated, the authority comes from God. This is one of the main errors of our time, the error of this unnatural reversal of reality. Quote, "For the rest, if the people remain the holders of power, what becomes of authority?" End quote. If it is the people who holds power, then the authority does not exercise its own power. What can such an authority be? Quote, "A shadow, a myth. There is no more law properly so called, no more obedience." The Sion acknowledges this. Indeed, since it demands that threefold political, economic, and intellectual emancipation in the name of human dignity, the future city in the formation of which it is engaged will have no masters and no servants. All citizens will be free, all comrades, all kings. A command, a precept would be viewed as an attack upon their freedom. Subordination to any form of superiority would be a diminishment of the human person, and obedience a disgrace." End quote. And this is indeed what they seek to arrive at little by little, to leave total freedom to men and no longer impose anything upon them, save uniquely for the maintenance of public order. But as this cannot be achieved, a country ends up with a socialist or communist government that allows no liberty whatsoever. On paper, the authority is vested in the people, but in reality it is in the hands of the intelligentsia. Look at Poland, where the authority is not in the hands of the people. Far from it, and their trade union solidarity notwithstanding, the people are aware of it. They obtain little freedoms and feeble concessions, but soon they shall lack bread to eat. This is where the false notion of authority leads. The Soviet government is a socialist government. Under the regime of state socialism, under the pretext of having received the delegation of the people, the rulers, the ruling class, maintain power and do not give it up. Nothing is more totalitarian than socialism.